The throne of Xylaris. The throne world of Xylaris was a monument to conquest. From orbit, its surface glimmered with spires of black steel and rivers of molten gold, monuments forged from the plunder of 1,000 subjugated worlds. In the great hall of the citadel, beneath vaulted ceilings that seemed to pierce the heavens themselves, sat the alien King Veythar. His armored form dwarfed the courtiers that surrounded him, a living symbol of the Empire's supremacy. His very presence radiated the weight of inevitability. All who opposed the Xylaris would kneel, or they would burn. Today, however, there was unease in the chamber. At the base of the throne's obsidian steps stood a human, shackled, bloodied, but unbowed. Commander Marcus Hale. His presence alone felt like a violation, a parasite that had slipped into the Empire's heart. The alien nobles muttered and hissed in disdain. Humanity, to them, was nothing more than a nuisance, a race of upstart primates who had spread across the stars too quickly for their own good. Fragile, short-lived, and unpredictable. They should have been crushed long ago. And yet this one man had eluded entire fleets, striking deep into the Empire's supply lines, sabotaging shipyards, liberating slave camps. Hale was called the Phantom of Soul by his people, and even among the Xylaris, his name carried a whisper of dread. "Bring him forward," Veythar commanded, his voice reverberating like thunder through the chamber. 2 towering guards shoved Hale to his knees. The human looked up, not with fear, but with eyes that burned with defiance. The contrast was almost absurd. The king, encased in golden armor that gleamed with alien technology, and Hale, dressed in torn combat fatigues, his face marked with scars of battles fought and survived. "You are the one they call Marcus Hale," Veythar said, his tone dripping with contempt. "You've humiliated my armies, slaughtered my generals, and kindled rebellion among my subjects. Tell me, human, was it bravery or madness that brought you here?" Hale's lips curled into the faintest smirk. "Neither. Just necessity." A ripple of outrage swept through the nobles. Insolence. Madness. For a prisoner to speak so casually before the king was unthinkable. But Veythar silenced them with a raised hand. He leaned forward, studying the human as though examining a peculiar insect. "You stand before me broken, Hale. Your people are scattered, your fleets are ash. What hope do you think remains?" Hale met his gaze, unflinching. "Hope is irrelevant. Humans don't fight because we expect to win. We fight because we refuse to kneel." For the first time, silence fell in the hall. Not the reverent silence owed to the king, but something heavier. Unease. The courtiers shifted in their armor. Hale's words carried a weight that pierced deeper than they cared to admit. Veythar's laughter broke the tension. It was a deep, booming sound meant to mock, yet it held a hint of something else, curiosity. "Then perhaps I shall indulge your defiance. A duel, you against me, before the eyes of my empire." The hall erupted in laughter. A duel? Between the mightiest warrior of Xylaris and a fragile human? It would be a spectacle, a lesson carved into blood and bone. But Hale did not laugh. He did not flinch. Instead, he rose slowly to his feet, the guard's hands gripping his arms, unable to force him back down. His gaze never left the king's. "I accept." The laughter faltered. A ripple of disbelief spread through the chamber. Some thought he was mad. Others thought he sought an honorable death. But a few, the shrewdest among the nobles, felt an unease they could not explain. "Tomorrow, then," Veythar declared, rising to his full colossal height. His armor gleamed as beams of alien light reflected across its ridges. "Before the son of Xylaris, your defiance will end, and your people will learn the fate of those who oppose their betters." The guards dragged Hale back, but he never looked away from the king. His smirk had faded into something colder, sharper, a promise unspoken. As the hall emptied, the nobles whispered among themselves. Some mocked, others boasted of the coming spectacle. But deep in the shadows of the citadel, the seed of doubt had been planted. One human had stood unbroken before their god-king. Tomorrow, all would witness what came of it. And though none would admit it aloud, more than one alien found themselves asking the forbidden question, what if the human won? Duel of Titans. The arena of Xylaris had been carved from the bones of mountains and the labor of conquered species. It was vast, circular, and crowned with a dome that opened to reveal the red-gold sun of the Empire. Beneath its light, the floor shimmered with inlaid obsidian and veins of glowing crystal. Rows upon rows of alien nobles filled the stands, their eyes burning with anticipation. This was no mere duel. This was spectacle, judgment, and affirmation of supremacy. At the center of it all, King Veythar descended from the high gates. He wore his ceremonial warplate, a suit of armor layered in jagged gold and black steel, taller than any other warrior in his empire. His movements were heavy but precise, each step a declaration of power. His blade, forged from a star's heart, was nearly as tall as Marcus Hale himself. Opposite him, the human warrior was brought forward. His shackles were removed, and a weapon was placed in his hands. A simple alien-forged sword, its surface humming faintly with energy. Compared to the king's weapon, it looked insignificant, almost insulting. Hale turned the blade in his hand once, testing its balance, and nodded to himself. The announcer's voice boomed across the chamber. By decree of the eternal king, this duel shall decide the fate of the insolent human. Witness the might of Xylaris. The crowd roared, a thunderous storm of sound that echoed into the heavens. The king raised his weapon. Kneel now, human, and I will grant you the mercy of a quick death. Hale's answer was silence. He slid 1 foot back, sword angled low, eyes locked on the towering figure before him. The gong sounded. Veythar struck first. The ground shook as his massive blade slammed into the arena floor, sending shards of obsidian flying. Hale rolled aside, narrowly avoiding the crushing blow. The audience erupted in laughter, already amused by the human's scrambling dodge. But Hale didn't scramble. He moved with precision, like a man who had studied his enemy for years. His steps were calculated, his breathing even. He darted in and struck at the joint of Veythar's armor, his blade sparking against alien alloy. It did no damage, but the sound echoed, a reminder that even kings could bleed. The king snarled, swinging his blade in a wide arc. Hale ducked, the tip of the sword grazing the air above his head. He countered with a thrust at the king's exposed wrist, forcing Veythar to recoil slightly. The nobles gasped, not from the strike itself, but from the audacity of it. Again and again, the king struck, each blow heavy enough to split stone, each swing a storm of force. And again, Hale evaded, deflecting when he could, rolling when he must, never letting the rhythm overwhelm him. He was smaller, weaker, yet every move he made had purpose. Minutes stretched into eternity. The king's rage grew. "You fight like an insect," Veythar roared, his voice echoing. "Scurrying, scratching, pointless." Hale smirked, circling, sweat glistening on his skin. "Funny. This insect seems hard to squash." The crowd hissed. No one spoke to their king that way. Veythar lunged, this time faster than before, driving Hale back with a furious series of strikes. The human stumbled, barely keeping his footing, his blade shuddering under the sheer force of each clash. One blow sent him skidding across the floor, his sword nearly torn from his hands. The audience cheered wildly. But as Veythar advanced for the finishing strike, Hale steadied himself. He wasn't broken. His eyes sharpened, his stance tightened. He had what he needed now. He had studied the king's rhythm. When Veythar swung his colossal blade downward in a final, crushing strike, Hale didn't dodge. He stepped forward inside the arc. The king's weapon slammed into the floor behind him, stuck in fractured crystal. In that heartbeat of vulnerability, Hale struck, driving his sword at the joint beneath the king's arm. Sparks exploded as the blade bit into armor, piercing deeper than expected. The king bellowed in pain and fury. The nobles gasped as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. A human had wounded their god king. Veythar tore free, swiping at Hale with his gauntlet, but the human ducked and rolled away, blade still ready. The king's breathing was heavier now, each motion slower, weighed down not just by exhaustion, but by disbelief. He had never been challenged like this. Hale's voice carried across the arena, cold and sharp. You thought this would be quick. You thought I'd break. But humans don't break, Veythar. We adapt. The words struck deeper than the blade had. Around the arena, whispers spread like wildfire. The nobles who once laughed now watched in uneasy silence. Veythar roared, enraged beyond reason. He swung wildly, every strike fueled by desperation. But the human no longer fought merely to survive. He fought with purpose, each dodge, each feint leading the king further into mistakes. And then it happened. Hale sidestepped a reckless overhead strike, his blade flashing upward in a perfect counter. The impact tore Veythar's sword from his hands, sending it crashing across the arena floor with a metallic thunder. The king stumbled forward, unarmed, his chest heaving. The human advanced, pressing his sword to the king's throat. Silence fell. Thousands of alien eyes stared down in shock. Their king, the eternal, the invincible, was disarmed, held at the mercy of a mortal human. Hale's voice cut through the silence like steel. Remember this moment. Your empire will never forget it. The fear spreads. The silence in the arena lingered long after the duel had ended. For the first time in living memory, the alien King Veythar had been humbled. A single human, scarred, weary, and weaponless by comparison, had placed a blade to his throat and forced the entire empire to witness the unthinkable. Hale stepped back, lowering his sword. He could have struck. He could have ended the king then and there, but he didn't. Instead, he let the silence speak. Mercy from a human was not weakness. It was control. I came here to show you, Hale said, his voice carrying across the stunned arena. Humanity does not kneel. And if your empire continues to press us, it will fall. Not by our strength alone, but by the weight of your fear. Then, as the guards hesitated, Hale calmly handed over the blade. He turned and walked toward the gates as though he were the one presiding over the chamber. None moved to stop him. None dared. That night, the empire trembled. In the Citadel's war council, the atmosphere was poison. Generals, nobles, and advisors gathered around the long obsidian table, their voices raised in argument. The king sat at the head, silent, his wounded arm hidden beneath layers of armor. It was a trick, spat General Croft, pounding the table with a clawed fist. The human used deception, nothing more. His kind are parasites. This proves nothing. Nothing, snapped another noble, her crest quivering with agitation. Every corner of the empire now whispers of what we saw. That human wounded the king, disarmed him. The people murmur that perhaps the eternal is not eternal after all. Blasphemy, Croft snarled, but even his voice wavered. The king's gaze swept the table, silencing them all. His words came low and heavy. It was no trick. The admission sent ripples through the chamber. He was small, yes, fragile, but he fought with a will that could not be broken. He adapted to every strike, every tactic. I struck him with all my strength, and still he stood. Veythar's fist clenched, metal groaning beneath the pressure. That is the danger of humanity. They endure. A suffocating quiet fell. The words of their monarch carried more weight than any rumor. And though no one dared say it aloud, a seed of doubt had taken root. Across the empire, the seed sprouted into wildfire. On the slave world of Drashul, whispers spread through the camps. The human bested the king. Broken species long thought incapable of resistance began to stir. Rebellions ignited in the mines, in the shipyards, in the very streets patrolled by Xylarian soldiers. On frontier garrisons, soldiers spoke of Hale with unease. Some mocked him to mask their fear. Others swore they had seen his spirit in their dreams. Discipline faltered. Garrisons became restless. Even among the nobles of Xylaris itself, loyalty wavered. The empire had been built on the image of invincibility, and now that image had cracked. Ambitious houses whispered of opportunity. Rivals sharpened daggers in the dark. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the citadel, Hale's plan unfolded. His capture had never been desperation, it was strategy. By facing the king in open combat, he had torn down the Empire's greatest weapon, fear of their ruler. Humanity could never match the Xylaris in numbers or brute force, but they didn't have to. All they needed was to shatter the illusion. Deep in the bowels of the palace, a small device activated. Hidden within his tattered uniform, Hale had smuggled in a transmitter, undetected amid the chaos of the duel. Now it pulsed, carrying a signal through the stars. The Terran fleets received the message, begin the spark. On occupied worlds, resistance cells awakened. Supply depots exploded, convoys vanished, and uprisings erupted with coordinated fury. Where once the Xylaris crushed dissent with overwhelming might, now they faced a tide of rebellion they couldn't contain. The Empire's strength was vast, but had always been centralized, dependent on the fear of their king to hold it together. With that fear broken, their grip slipped. Back in his private chambers, Veythar stood before the great mirror of obsidian steel. His reflection glared back, scarred, imperfect, mortal. For the first time in his reign, he saw not a god, but a warrior wounded. He remembered the human's words, carved deeper into his mind than any blade. Humans don't fight because we expect to win. We fight because we refuse to kneel. His hands trembled, not from weakness, but from something far more dangerous. Regret. The king summoned his elite guard. Prepare the fleets. Summon every warrior still loyal. I will burn Earth myself if I must. Humanity will not survive their defiance. But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. His war would no longer be fought against armies alone. It would be fought against an idea, against a spirit that could not be shackled, enslaved, or silenced. And that battle, he feared, was already lost. Regret of a king. The sky above Earth burned. Alien warships, vast as cities, descended through the atmosphere, their weapons spilling fire across the oceans and continents. The fleets of Xylaris had come in force, summoned by a king desperate to reclaim his glory. At the forefront of the invasion, King Veythar's flagship cut through the clouds like a blade. From its command throne, the monarch of Xylaris stared down at the world below. His armor was newly reforged, gleaming, his wounds hidden. Yet inside, a gnawing shadow lingered. He could still feel the sting of a human blade at his throat, and the words that haunted him. We refuse to kneel. Below, humanity did not cower. The Terran defense fleet rose from hidden bases, ships scarred but defiant. In orbit, small craft darted through the firestorm, striking with precision where the enemy was most vulnerable. On the ground, soldiers, civilians, and resistance fighters fought side by side. Cities became fortresses, ruins became ambush sites. Humanity did not wait to be conquered. They struck back with fury. At the head of it all stood Marcus Hale. From the command center in New Berlin, he directed strikes with calm efficiency. His duel with Veythar had become legend overnight, a story carried across encrypted channels, whispered in bunkers and on battlefields. Soldiers looked to him not as a commander, but as proof that victory was possible. They think breaking us is just a matter of firepower, Hale said to his officers as the map lit with enemy incursions. But they still don't understand. We're not fighting for conquest. We're fighting because this is our home. That's something they'll never match. When the king's forces made landfall, they expected surrender. What they found was resistance more brutal than any battlefield in the stars. Guerrilla teams struck from sewers and tunnels. Militia forces lured armored walkers into collapsing skyscrapers, and human pilots launched suicidal runs that crippled alien dreadnoughts. Every loss only fueled more determination. Still, the king pressed on. From his warship, he directed waves of destruction, determined to prove humanity's defiance meaningless. Yet the more he pushed, the more resistance he faced, not only from humans, but from others. The cracks in his empire had widened. Alien species once enslaved by Xylaris now fought beside humanity. Fleets of rebels appeared at the edges of the system, striking his supply lines, cutting off reinforcements. What began as an invasion became a war on two fronts, the humans below and the rebels in the void. Veythar's fury burned hotter than the fire raining from his cannons. "Then I will finish it myself," he growled, donning his armor and preparing for descent. The final confrontation came amid the ruins of Old Washington. Smoke rose in black pillars, streets were choked with rubble, and the Potomac ran red with ash. Hale stood at the front lines, sword in hand, when the sky split open and Veythar descended like a meteor. The impact shook the earth. Dust and debris exploded outward as the Alien King rose, colossal and wrathful. His blade gleamed with the light of a dying sun. "Hail!" his voice thundered. "This ends now." The battlefield stilled. Human and alien alike turned their eyes toward the two figures at the center of the ruins. A king and a warrior, predator and prey, though now the roles were blurred. Hale tightened his grip on his blade. His body bore the marks of exhaustion, his uniform tattered, but his stance was unshaken. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." The king roared and charged. Their blades met in a storm of sparks and steel, the clash echoing across the battlefield. Each strike from Veythar carried the weight of a world, but Hale no longer fought only with muscle. He fought with every ounce of cunning, every lesson learned from a lifetime of war. Veythar swung wide. Hale slipped beneath, driving his blade against the weak points of the king's armor. Veythar pressed him down with brute force. Hale redirected, turning strength against itself. The king's frustration mounted with every failed strike. "You are nothing," Veythar bellowed, a pest clinging to a dying rock. "Maybe," Hale grunted, locking blades, their faces inches apart. "But pests survive." With a sudden twist, Hale forced Veythar off balance, driving him into the ruins of a shattered monument. The king staggered, stunned by the speed and ferocity of the counter. Around them, humans roared in defiance. For the first time, the Xylarian soldiers hesitated. Hale advanced, relentless now, each strike faster, sharper. Veythar fought back with desperation, but he was no longer the untouchable monarch of legends. He was just a warrior drowning in his own fury. Finally, Hale fainted low, then drove his blade upward into the crack beneath the king's chest plate. The weapon pierced deep, glowing as it tore through alien steel and flesh. Veythar froze, eyes wide. His blade dropped, shattering stone. Hale leaned close, voice steady. "You should never have confronted humanity." The king's body collapsed with a thunderous crash, shaking the battlefield. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the humans cheered, their voices rising like storm. Across the system, the Xylaris forces faltered. Without their king, the illusion of invincibility shattered. Fleets scattered, rebellions surged, and the empire began to crumble. When the smoke cleared, Hale stood among his people, bloodied but unbroken. The war was not over, but a truth had been carved into the stars. Humanity would never kneel. And across the galaxy, in whispers and fearful tones, a legend spread. The king of Xylaris confronted a human and instantly regretted it.